We spend our days running on an exhausting, unbroken treadmill. We stress over the next promotion, the next deadline, and the next milestone, constantly pushing our present happiness aside for the demands of a future that is spinning out of control. This entire sprint relies on a single, massive gamble: the assumption that if we sacrifice our time and energy right now, we will eventually reach a point where we are finally allowed to enjoy our lives. In 1571, on his 38th birthday, a French philosopher named Michel de Montaigne walked into his office and permanently resigned from his prestigious position as a judge in the Bordeaux Parliament. He had spent years watching the older politicians and aristocrats around him. They dedicated decades to chasing royal favors and public honors, playing the role of important public figures so relentlessly that they completely forgot how to live ordinary lives. Whenever these men actually secured a promotion or achieved a lifelong goal, the satisfaction wore off almost immediately. Within days, they were already agonizing over the next step on the ladder. Realizing he was trapped on that same exhausting track, Montaigne quit. He retreated to his family's estate in the French countryside, setting himself up in a stone tower on the property, where he spent his days studying the only subject he actually wanted to understand: his own mind. Most of us cannot simply abandon our jobs and move to a rural estate, but Montaigne's writings weren't a literal instruction manual for quitting. He diagnosed unbridled ambition as an unnatural disease of the soul, offering a framework to correct your relationship with success, no matter where you work. We are conditioned to tie our worth entirely to our productivity. We check notifications before getting out of bed, living our entire existence at the front counter of a metaphorical shop, handing our energy over to the demands of everyone else. To survive this, Montaigne argued you need an Arrière-Boutique, a room behind the shop. It is a strict psychological boundary that protects a quiet space belonging entirely to you. He enforced strict rules for this inner sanctuary: no family, no work, and an hour dedicated to unmonetized hobbies where you aren't asked to be useful. Today, that translates to taking an hour for a hobby you have zero intention of monetizing, or taking a walk without a phone. It is a designated pocket of time where no one is asking you to be useful. He applied this same defensive boundary to his wealth. When his father died, Montaigne inherited the massive family estate, along with literal reserves of physical gold and silver. Instead of feeling liberated, he became deeply paranoid, his thoughts entirely consumed by guarding his own vault. To break the anxiety, he took a radical step. He completely stopped counting his coins. He forced himself to adopt a comfortable lifestyle and accepted minor financial losses as a simple tax on living, rather than obsessing over every penny. He realized that hoarding wealth caused him far more stress than being broke ever did. True security comes from building an absolute internal boundary against paranoia and treating your savings as a tool to buy peace of mind, rather than a high score you have to continuously increase. While other 16th century scholars wrote heavy volumes about how mankind was the center of the universe, Montaigne sat on his floor playing with his cat. He watched the animal and wondered if he wasn't just as much of an entertaining toy to her as she was to him. To the cat, his political career and wealth meant absolutely nothing. Montaigne realized we manufacture our own misery by taking ourselves far too seriously, treating a passive-aggressive email or a bad meeting like a matter of universal consequence. Modern psychologists echo this with the 1-year test. When you are lying awake at 2 a.m. sweating over a deadline, ask yourself if the issue will matter 1 year from now. 99% of the time, the crisis is entirely temporary, and recognizing that instantly dials down the panic. Another way to break the ego is to place yourself in an environment that naturally makes you feel small. Sitting by the ocean or walking through a forest for 10 minutes forces your own perspective to shift, as looking at something that has existed for millions of years causes the exhausting pressure of your own importance to recede. The modern corporate rat race constantly demands instant expertise and visionary takes. Montaigne found the posturing of his era exhausting and instead practiced radical intellectual humility. He actually minted a coin asking, "What do I know?" and found immense relief in simply looking at people and saying, "I don't know." When you admit you don't have all the answers, you drop the weight of a fake professional ego. You give yourself permission to exist in a room, breathing quietly, without the constant need to prove your worth to everyone around you. This obsession with productivity eventually bleeds into our personal lives. We turn reading into career growth, we track our exercise metrics obsessively, and we transform our vacations into stressful checklists of landmarks we have to photograph. When Montaigne took a 17-month road trip across Europe, he refused to follow a rigid schedule. If he heard a local rumor about an ancient ruin or a natural hot spring, he would instantly order his carriage off the main road to go investigate, driving his travel companions crazy. He believed that movement provided the value. Engaging in acts with zero measurable output or destination is what actually keeps the soul intact in a world obsessed with efficiency. He applied this exact same philosophy to the people in his life. He actively avoided shallow professional networking and the trading of favors, seeking out unfiltered human connections where he could share his fears and ideas with zero hidden motives. This resulted in the defining relationship of his life, his profound, unshakable friendship with fellow writer Etienne de la Boétie. When asked years later why their bond was so strong, Montaigne couldn't list logical reasons. He simply said, "Because it was he, because it was I." Wandering through life without constantly tracking your progress and maintaining a circle of people who accept you without your professional titles effectively ends the race. You find the finish line exactly where you stand. Montaigne's ultimate realization about how to live came from a violently close encounter with death. One afternoon, a servant lost control of a massive workhorse and crashed into him at full speed. Montaigne was thrown to the dirt, unconscious and vomiting blood. His family genuinely believed he was dead. But as he slowly drifted back to consciousness over the next few days, he experienced something shocking. The actual process of dying was a gentle, painless fading away. He described it as slipping into a deep sleep. Before the accident, Montaigne had been deeply anxious about his mortality. He had spent years intensely studying Stoic philosophy, mentally rehearsing for his own death so he would be prepared when it arrived. Surviving the crash completely shattered that anxiety. He realized the Stoics had it backward. You don't need to spend your life intensely preparing for the end, because nature handles the dying part for you. Your only job is to figure out how to live. This exposes the central flaw of the entire rat race. We sacrifice our best years to an exhausting treadmill of stress, assuming we will finally get to enjoy our lives when we hit retirement. Montaigne's brush with death proved that later is a massive, dangerous gamble. From that point on, Montaigne dedicated himself to a philosophy of radical presence. He captured it in a beautifully simple phrase: "When I dance, I dance. When I sleep, I sleep." He applied this absolute focus to everything. Later in life, when he suffered from excruciating kidney stones, he didn't try to mentally escape the chronic pain. He chose to coexist with it, finding a strange beauty in experiencing the full spectrum of reality without fighting it. Montaigne viewed the capacity to stop escaping, to turn off the phone and bring full, unbroken attention to ordinary moments, like the smell of morning coffee, as the highest form of luxury. He famously wrote that when his time finally came, he didn't want to be caught stressing over his legacy or clutching his wealth. He wanted death to find him entirely unconcerned, peacefully planting cabbages in his garden. Life exists entirely in the ordinary daily grind of the present. Escaping the rat race requires ending the wait and actively participating in the day you are currently living.